I'm now middle-aged as they speak, but at one point I realized that living with a woman for the rest of life was a real challenge. It would be more accurate to say that a woman is afraid to marry because she scares my stepmother to favor his husband terribly, but my stepmother, who gives me hints and tries to connect with me behind my father's back, surprisingly is my partner, although legally she is my father's wife. To be more frank, I gave up marriage due to my stepmother. My stepmother is over 60, but she still plays the role of my woman. After confirming that my father has fallen asleep, my stepmother, who rushes to my room and urges me to quickly get things done, was only living nominally as a couple with my weary and elderly father. The role of a real husband was something I had to fulfill. My father has been frail since his youth, and I knew he was not destined for a long life. There was a time when I thought of my stepmother as merely the one who would take care of my father's sickness. My biological mother passed away in an unexpected accident. When I was in the upper grades of elementary school, I lost my mother at a young age, and the sense of loss and sadness was overwhelming. After my mother passed away, my relatives started urging my father to remarry in a hurry. The adult relatives told me, who was still in my early teens, that it was my duty as a child to convince my father to remarry. Since my father was immersed in work due to his weak health, I had to take care of all things such as chores and studies by myself. If I didn't do the housework, my father, who was tired all day from work, had to do it when he came home. My father, who always lacked energy and easily felt fatigue, never left work on time. I didn't want to bother him with chores when he came home. It seems I was maturing. After enrolling in college and experiencing campus life for a year, like most men, I enlisted in the military. Although I was worried about my frail father, I decided it would be better to experience military life while I was still young. The first time I became aware of my stepmother's existence was during my time in the military. When I was a private in the military, on a certain Sunday morning, I was told someone had come to visit. Hurrying out to see who it might be, I made my way to the infirmary. My father was there, with a woman standing next to him. My father introduced her to me as his companion, and she greeted me with a warm smile. It was surprising to see my father, who had been unresponsive to suggestions of remarrying, arrive with a young woman without a word of explanation. My father suggested we go out, and I followed his lead. In the 80s, when I was serving in the military, we were told to always answer yes, I am enjoying it if someone asked us how we were doing. I responded with a loud yes, I understand, and got into my father's car parked in the guardhouse parking lot. My father bought my favorite chicken stew and told me to call the woman who came with him mother. The woman, who spoke with a bright smile in this incomprehensible situation, said, I am young and lacking in many ways, but I promise to take good care of your father, so please bear with me. Despite her innocent appearance, her gaze was sparkling and her tone was refreshing. I asked her, can I really call you mother? And she responded with a bright smile, are you really accepting me as your mother? Her teeth were so white and beautiful. My stepmother, who had formed a new family, seemed to make a lot of effort to win my favor, as I was my father's only child. I accepted my stepmother as my mother, and thought I should be good to my stepmother in the future. After the first visit with my stepmother, my father often came to visit. When I came back from the visit, the expressions of my comrades in the living quarters changed. It was because my stepmother had brought an enormous amount of snacks for us to share. After my discharge from the military, I returned to university. However, the 80s were filled with endless demonstrations, and it was impossible to have proper classes. I didn't participate in the demonstrations with my classmates and was busy going home. My university peers called me a coward for not joining the fight, but I didn't pay attention to such criticism. not demonstrating was my free will. When I arrived home and rang the bell, my stepmother always greeted me with a smile. After dinner, I studied while my stepmother did the housework. At that time, whenever there was a problem in my father's company, he would go to the overseer's branch to resolve it. In an era when hardly anyone from school had traveled abroad, the fact that my father was going abroad was a testament to his capabilities and his high standing in the company. Thanks to this, our household was quite well off. The day that incident happened, I arrived home and my stepmother greeted me warmly. "Your father had to go on a sudden long-term business trip today. He came home, quickly packed his things, and left. I didn't think much of it since my father was always busy." After dinner, I felt a bit bored and was looking at old photo albums. My stepmother asked, "Son, can I have a drink with you tonight?" I replied, "You drink, mother? I had no that is." My stepmother didn't say anything, but simply showed her upper 4 teeth and smiled. She always called me son instead of just calling me by my name. I felt like I understood her feelings. It seemed like she attached a lot of significance to our relationship as mother and son. My stepmother and I had a light drink together. At that time, soju was a bit stronger than it is now. We had some liquor at home, but my stepmother knew I preferred soju, so she seemed to have bought some in advance. She asked me with a curious expression how my classes were going with the relentless protests, how I was getting along with my friends, and I answered her questions as I drank. My stepmother turned out to be a lightweight drinker. After just 2 shots of soju, her face turned red as a beet, and even her eyes were bloodshot. She quickly became incoherent and disoriented, and as she called me son, she suggested we look at the photo album together. She pinched my cheek as she marveled at my cute childhood pictures, saying she had never seen such a cute child before, and draped her arm over my shoulder. I was in my mid-20s, and I found myself reacting strongly to my stepmother, showing interest in even my childhood pictures. Embarrassed, I went to the bathroom to calm down. It was a hot summer night and we had all the windows open because of the heat. I was hot from the soju, and having my young and beautiful stepmother so close to me, looking at the album was too much to bear. As we looked at the album together, my stepmother shed tears, saying what a shame it was for my biological mother to leave the world and leave behind such a good and handsome son. I started to feel different feelings for my stepmother who was like this. As if reading my heart, my stepmother asked, "Son, do you still only see me as your mother?" I shook my head. My stepmother looked at me intently, and I felt as if she was asking for something. I read her gaze, quickly pulled my stepmother into my arms, and went to my room. We had a great time all night. Until then, I had been a bachelor. I had truly become an adult from a child's level. My stepmother asked if I had never properly dated a woman, to which I shyly nodded. Then I told her that when she came to visit me at the military, I was so taken aback by her beauty that I almost screamed. I hugged my stepmother once again. After making love 3 times, we fell asleep in the same bed. When I felt the urge to use the bathroom in the early morning, my stepmother woke up at the sound. We made love once more. She told me that she had often felt resentful toward my father during their marriage. My stepmother had shared a bed with my father, but the number of times they had been intimate after remarrying could be counted on one hand. My father was always tired, as I had feared, and with lots of work and constant late nights, plus frequent overseas business trips, she felt very lonely as a woman. Now we could freely discuss sex, but back then, how many wives could ask their husbands to be more intimate? After that day, I shared a room with my stepmother. When we were intimate, she asked me to call her by her name. When I would call her Christina, she was overjoyed. At first, I was inexperienced and finished quickly. But as the number of times we were intimate increased, my skills improved. My stepmother told me that I was becoming a real man. and she patted me on the back, saying I was awesome. My father came home after finishing his overseas business trip, and after confirming that he was sound asleep. She came to my room and we made love. Thus, times changed. My stepmother was usually very modest and only knew about housework, but when we were intimate, she was truly active. My father, who was always engrossed in work, has been retired for a while. Unfortunately, my father's health is not as good as it used to be. If his health worsens, he has asked us to send him to a nursing home, instead of struggling to take care of him at home. My stepmother said we should stick together until the end, asking how we could talk about such things given our relationship. I thought to myself that I wouldn't be interested in any other woman, only my stepmother, and I would be with her. When my father goes to heaven, I plan to live with my stepmother.
It seemed like any other day, or so I thought. I'd stuck to my routine for weeks, trying to ignore the strange feeling that something was off. Rachel had been distant for a while, but I convinced myself it was just work stress. We'd built a life together, and I never thought anything could come between us. But looking back, the signs had been there, small things that only made sense in hindsight. I spent my days lost in thought, driving from place to place, doing errands, going through the motions of daily life. That day was no different, until a simple, unexpected event at a stoplight threw everything into chaos. I was already feeling a bit worn out, but nothing could have prepared me for what was about to happen. Being in the wrong place at the wrong time never leads to anything good. I couldn't control it, though. I was waiting at a red light when a car pulled up next to me. The driver motioned for me to roll down my window. "You've got a flat tire," he said. Grateful for the warning, I turned into the Walmart parking lot nearby to check. Sure enough, a screw had punctured the tire, causing a slow but steady leak. Perfect. Now I had to figure out my next move. I decided to head home and buy a jar of that slime. When I returned, I pulled the screw out. Big mistake. Air started hissing out. I screwed it back in and filled up the tire at the gas station in the parking lot. I was only 15 miles from home and kept checking it. If the air got too low, I'd use the slime. About 5 miles from home, I noticed in the side mirror that the tire was getting low. I pulled into a store, but there was no air. It was time to check the slime. I put it in, and green slime oozed out. I guess they call it slime for a reason, but the air stopped hissing. As I was about to get back in the car, a pickup truck pulled up. It was one of those massive ones with huge tires, sitting so high you'd need a ladder to get in. I recognized it. The door opened, and a tall guy with blonde hair, cowboy boots, and a giant belt buckle stepped out. I chuckled to myself, but it didn't last. The passenger door opened, and a beautiful woman with raven hair got out. I definitely knew her. It was Rachel, the woman I'd been married to for 18 years. What the hell? I parked off to the side, and they didn't even notice my car. It was a company car, a small, boxy import, not too noticeable. They walked into the store holding hands, and she was laughing. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. I couldn't breathe or move. All I could do was stand there like an idiot. Now I remembered where I'd seen this guy before. He worked at the same company as Rachel. She was the office manager at a mental health clinic, and he worked in customer service. I'd seen his truck outside their building. The question was, what was Rachel doing with him? I couldn't remember his name at first, but then it hit me. Jerry Garner. The question now was, why wasn't Rachel at work? I was going to find out. I went back to my car and waited. When they came out of the store carrying coffee cups, he helped her into the truck. They sped off, and I followed at a safe distance. They pulled up to our house, and he drove into the garage. The door closed behind them, and I couldn't see anything else. I sat there for about 30 minutes, but the tire kept nagging at me. I checked it, but if it was low, I couldn't tell. 2 hours later, they left, and as they passed me, I held up a file folder to hide my face. Not that they would have noticed. They were too wrapped up in each other. Rachel didn't leave work until 5, and now it was only 2:30. I had time. First, I had to go inside and see what I could find. At 4, I needed to pick up Toby, and I had no idea what I was going to tell her. Toby was my 15-year-old daughter. I couldn't imagine what I'd find inside, but maybe I'd get some answers. When I entered the house, it was quiet. The only sound was the drip of the faucet I still needed to fix in Toby's bathroom, and the whisper of air from the vents. I looked around but didn't see anything unusual. I checked upstairs. The bed had fresh sheets. My heart sank. I pressed my back against the wall and slid to the floor, feeling numb. There seemed to be only one explanation. I sat there for about 30 minutes, my mind spinning. I couldn't make sense of my thoughts. I felt like I'd been pilled. My stomach growled, and I got up to grab a Sprite. I was feeling hot and sweaty. So I went to the bathroom. I fumbled for a washcloth, soaked it in cold water, and wiped my face. After washing up, I felt a bit better. That's when I noticed something. The shower floor was wet. They had showered before heading back to work. I wandered back into the bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed in a daze, the same bed my wife and her lover had just used. That thought jolted me up, and I looked around in horror. This felt like a crime scene. I had no clue what to do. Well, divorcing Rachel was a given, but beyond that I had no idea where to start, and I still had to pick up Toby from school. What was I supposed to tell her? I stumbled out to the car, feeling like I'd been drunk for 10 days. My head throbbed, and I probably looked terrible. I wasn't in any shape to drive, but I couldn't leave Toby waiting. Suddenly, I realized she was the only person I could truly rely on. My baby was going to be all right. I had to make sure of that. As I pulled into the line of cars, I saw her standing by the school door. She walked down the sidewalk to the car, looking so beautiful it made my heart ache. Toby had her mother's dark hair and skin, almost Mediterranean, and the most striking eyes I'd ever seen. They looked dark brown like her mom's, but with streaks of gold and green. The doctor called them hazel, but I'd never seen anything quite like them. She was tall like me, with long, honey-brown legs and undeniable beauty. She tossed her backpack in the back seat and leaned in to kiss me, but froze mid-motion. "Daddy, what's wrong?" she asked. "Are you sick? Did something happen? Is Mommy okay? What's going on, Daddy?" Her voice was rising with worry, and I could hear the fear creeping in. I had to say something. "I'm fine, kitten," I said. "No one's hurt or sick. But I need to talk to you, Toby. Let's go to the park. I just need to hold you and talk for a minute, okay? No more questions until we get there, all right?" "Okay, Daddy, but you're scaring me," she said. "I know, kitten, but it's going to be okay," I told her, hoping it wasn't a lie. It only took 5 minutes to get to the park. I had pushed her on those swings 1,000 times. Rachel and I used to sit on the benches and watch her play. Those were happy days. Was my life going to be nothing but memories of better times? We walked to a bench and she took my hand, swinging her arms just like she used to as a little girl. We sat down and I struggled to find the right words. "Just tell me, Daddy," she said. "I can handle it." "Well, I'm not sure I can," I replied. I told her everything, what I had seen, what I had felt, and the tears streamed down my face. She held my hand the entire time, and when I was finished, she clung to me. "That doesn't sound good, Daddy," she said. "We need to go home and talk to Mom about it. It all depends on what she tells us. I know it looks bad, but we don't have the full story. We have to ask her." I kissed the top of her head, filled with pride. My baby girl was braver than I was. She tugged my hand and I stood up. "Do you want to go?" I asked her. Her eyes sparkled. She had just gotten her driver's license. A flicker of doubt crossed her face, but disappeared quickly. She drove us home carefully, and sure enough, Rachel's car was in the garage. Rachel greeted us at the door with hugs and kisses like everything was normal. Either she was an award-winning actress, or I had misunderstood everything. "How about takeout tonight?" she asked. "My treat." "I think we need to talk to you for a minute, Mom," Toby said. "Okay, everything all right, baby?" Rachel asked. "I don't know," Toby replied. "Let's find out." We went inside and I sat next to Toby on the couch. Rachel stayed in the ugly chair she insisted on buying. "What's wrong?" she asked. There wasn't a hint of concern on her face. "How was your day?" I asked. She gave me a puzzled look. "The usual," she said. "One of the company reps brought lunch from the onion basket. It was busy and I barely had a minute to myself. Why are you asking?" "So, you've been at the office all day?" Toby asked. "Of course," Rachel said. "What's with the questions? What's going on?" "So, you weren't here at the house this afternoon with Jerry Garner?" I asked. Her face turned pale. "No, of course not," she said. "Are you accusing me of something, Oliver?" "I saw you," I said. "What?" "You didn't see anything," she stammered. "What are you trying to do?" "He's lying, Toby. I was at work all day. You can ask Angel." "No, I don't think he's lying, Mom," Toby said. "I think you're lying. I'm not asking Angel. She'll lie for you. I think I'll call David Jones, your boss. He won't lie for you. What's his number? He's gone tonight, Rachel said. I'll have him call you tomorrow. What are you two doing? Trying to trick me? You think you can just come in here and trip me up? What are you accusing me of? She was trying to go on the offensive. I think you've been lying to yourself, I told her. You lied, Rachel. All three of us know it. Why did you do it? I could see her mind racing, trying to figure out what to say next. Finally, she spoke. All right, yes, I was here. That's why I didn't want to tell you. I knew you'd grill me and accuse me of something. No one accused you, Toby responded, but I am now. You tried to make it seem like Dad was lying. You twisted everything to cover your own lies. What are you lying about, Mom? Are you having an affair with that idiot? You don't even know him, Rachel snapped. Why call him an idiot? I've met him twice, Toby said. The way he looks at me makes me want to shower. But that's not the point. Are you having an affair with him? Rachel's eyes darted around like she was cornered. After a moment, she broke down. I didn't want it to turn out like this, she said, her voice shaky. I wasn't ready. Ready for what? Toby pressed. I fell in love with Jerry, she confessed, glancing at me. I'm sorry, Oliver, it just happened. We work closely and I don't know. He feels like the other half of me. We connected and I couldn't stop it. We're in love. I was going to tell you when the time was right. Once we both get divorced, we'll get married. I'm sorry. I didn't want you to find out this way. Toby, it'll be okay. You can see your dad whenever you want. Jerry has a nice house on the lake. He even has a daughter. He really likes you, Toby. He'll be so happy. Are you insane? Toby shouted. I'm not living with that idiot. He'll probably sneak into my room at night. I'll live with Dad. I won't see you anymore. How could you do this? She spun around and stormed upstairs, slamming the door. I heard the lock click. Rachel looked at me, her face pale and trembling. She'll get over it, she said quietly. Jerry's a really nice guy, Oliver. I think you'll like him. I'm sorry, but I need to be happy. Jerry makes me happy. That's all there is to it. I just stared at her, trying to process the person she had become. It felt like she had turned into someone else entirely. I wasn't going to argue. It was obvious she was lost to me. Whatever you say, Rachel, I said flatly. When are you moving out? Moving out? She asked, confused. I don't have anywhere to go, she said. Jerry's still married. We need to tell his wife first, and we both have to get divorced before we figure out what's next. No, you're moving out, I told her coldly. I'll give you 3 days. Her mouth dropped open. What are you talking about? You can't just kick me out of my own house. If anyone's leaving, it's you. You're forgetting something, I said. This is my house. I owned it before I even met you. It was paid off before we got married. It's not marital property. My name is on the deed. Yours isn't. You're moving out. Where am I supposed to go? She asked, her voice shaky. You're just going to throw me out on the street? I don't care where you go, I said. Maybe you can find a room at the Cheating Hooker Motel, one of those places that rents by the hour. That's where you and people like you belong. Her eyes filled with tears. That hurts, Oliver, she said softly. You don't have to call me names. I didn't plan to fall in love with Jerry. It just happened. We clicked, and I realized I had to be with him. I never meant to hurt you. Oh, so you just accidentally hurt me? I said sarcastically. Like tripping and accidentally poking your eye out. My mom used to warn me about that. Now I get it. It was an accident, right? Well, that makes it all better. You don't have to be sarcastic, she said. Why can't you just accept that Jerry and I love each other? I don't know, Rachel, I replied. Maybe because this morning you told me you loved me. Now you're telling me you love him. I'm a little confused. I love you, Oliver, she said, almost pleading. I'll always love you. I'm just in love with Jerry. Oh, well, that clears it up, I said, shaking my head. You've been telling me you were in love with me every day for 18 years. I thought that's why we got married. I guess I was mistaken. Oh, no, we were in love, she insisted, reaching for my hand. I pulled away. You've got 3 days, Rachel, I said. If you're not out by then, I'll have the sheriff remove you and toss your stuff on the lawn. Please, Oliver, she begged, her voice trembling. It doesn't have to end like this. We can still be friends. Jerry wants to be your friend, too. We have Toby to think about. I told you I love you. I don't want to lose you as a friend. We've been together too long for you to just throw it all away. I stared at her, All the sadness, all the grief I'd been feeling was suddenly replaced by burning anger. "You're delusional, Rachel," I said, my voice low and cold. "Friends with you? With that dirtbag?" "No. Tell him if he ever sees me, he'd better run. As for you, you're the enemy now. I'll destroy everything you have. You've got 3 days. After that, I never want to see you again." I turned and went into the bedroom, leaving her standing there speechless. That was it for me. She followed me around, still going on about staying friends while I moved her stuff into the spare bedroom. She had more clothes in the closet than I could carry, so I just tossed them onto the bed, grabbed a pile, and took them to the spare room, hanging them in the closet. She stood there for a while, talking and watching me. When she went to hang up her clothes, I took the chance to slip out and lock the bedroom door. I heard her walking down the hall, but when she tried the knob, she gave up and walked away. A few minutes later, Toby texted, "Are you okay, Dad?" "Yes, kitten," I replied. "How about you?" "No, but I will be," she answered. "Okay, love you." "Love you too. Drive me to school in the morning? I don't want to ride with her." CC. I crawled into bed and lay awake for hours trying to figure out my next steps. I must have fallen asleep around 3, but the phone alarm soon went off. I got up, took a shower, and called my boss. I told him I was getting a divorce and needed a few days off. He told me to take as much time as I needed and offered his condolences. I went downstairs, brewed some coffee, and had a couple of cups. I made breakfast for Toby and me. She came down on time, looking as beautiful as ever, and eagerly ate breakfast. After a while, Rachel came in, poured herself some coffee, and tried to talk to us, but we both ignored her. It was time to take Toby to school, and Rachel asked if she was ready. Toby just looked at her, then turned to me and asked, "Are you ready, Daddy?" I jingled my keys, and she grabbed her backpack. "Fine," Rachel said, her voice full of frustration. "Act like toddlers if that makes you feel better." She stormed off, grabbed her purse, threw us another glance, and left. I dropped Toby off at school, and she kissed me on the way out. I sat in the car for a moment, watching her walk into the building. I thought about my friend Dan, who had recently gone through a divorce. I decided to call him and ask about his lawyer. Dan didn't recommend his own lawyer. Instead, he suggested I use his wife's lawyer and gave me the name. I looked up the number, and when I called, a woman answered and put me on hold. After explaining my situation, she agreed to meet with me that afternoon, so I started taking steps. We had an investment, but there wasn't much I could do about it right away. However, I wasn't going to let her rack up huge credit card bills, so I called and lowered the limits on our cards to $500. Of course, this impacted me too, but I wasn't about to finance her affair. The meeting with Elizabeth Baxter didn't get off to a great start. She had some assumptions I had to clear up before we could even begin. She assumed I was leaving Rachel for someone else. "You've got it wrong," I told her. "Rachel is having an affair with a coworker. He's married, and they're both planning to divorce and marry each other." "I'm sorry," she said. "I don't represent people who leave for someone else. I can't live with myself if I do." "I get it," I replied. "We have a daughter. I want to minimize the damage. Do you think I could get custody of her?" "It's possible," she said. "In theory, custody can go to either parent, but in practice, it's harder for fathers, especially with daughters. How old is she? And does she want to stay with you?" "She's 15, and yes, she wants to stay with me," I answered. "That's a big plus," she said. "In this state, children over 14 can choose which parent to live with, and their wishes are heavily considered. If she were younger, your chances would be slim. But since she's 15 and wants to stay with you, that will work in your favor for the custody agreement." "Just do your best," I told her. As I drove home, I kept wondering what my next steps should be. I knew I had to do something, but it had to be legal. Getting arrested would mean losing Toby, and that was not an option. I needed a plan. Burning down houses? Well, you have to make sure it's not your own. This was going to take careful thought. I suspected Jerry's wife was as clueless as I had been, so the first step would be letting her know. I needed to make a list. First, I'd inform Rachel's parents. They loved me and adored Toby, so they should hear the truth first. But how would I go about that? Letting our friends know was also a priority. I figured I could stir up quite a storm on social media. That was the first thing on my list. She had a Facebook account for our family, so I played around with it, used Messenger, and pieced things together. I searched online and found that Jerry's wife had done the same digging. I took screenshots of a few pictures and posted on Rachel's page, announcing that we were getting divorced and that she had found her soulmate in Jerry, even including his picture. I changed my password and logged out. It felt satisfying. I wondered how long it would take before her friends and family bombarded her phone and Facebook page. I hoped Jerry's wife would understand what was happening. I didn't know her, and I felt bad for the chaos this would bring into her life. But if she was like me, she deserved to know the truth. I called my mom, and the conversation went about as poorly as I expected. After the initial shock, she just said she'd tell Dad and that they were there for me if I needed anything. I figured I'd let Rachel break the news to her parents herself. We were close, and I didn't want to be the reason for any estrangement. Besides, I wasn't sure how to tell them anyway. Somehow, "Your daughter is a cheating strumpet," didn't feel like the right message. They'd probably shoot the messenger. It didn't take long for everything to unravel. Around 2 in the afternoon, Rachel's name popped up on my phone. I answered, and she was livid. "You a hole!" Her rage gave me a bit of satisfaction. "You just couldn't leave it alone, could you? I know you blocked me on Facebook. Take that crap down. Jerry's wife doesn't know yet. My friends are blowing up my phone asking what's going on. My parents know. I'm telling you, Oliver, clean this up." "No, Rachel, you don't get to boss me around," I replied. "What are you, 5 years old? Take it down, Oliver. I'm serious." "You should be happy," I said. "Now everyone knows about you and your soulmate. Are you ashamed people know you're a cheating strumpet?" "I don't," she began, but then stopped, realizing how absurd her denial would sound. "Oliver, please take it down. It wasn't supposed to go like this." "You gave up control when you cheated, Rachel. You lost any right to my respect or courtesy. I told you, you're the enemy now. Deal with it." I hung up. When the phone buzzed again, I ignored it. It was time to pick up Toby. When I told her about my conversation with Elizabeth Baxter, she was happy to hear she'd likely stay with me, but overall, she wasn't pleased. "What's wrong with Mom, Dad?" she asked. "You know I love her, but she's always been a bit immature. I've always felt like I had 2 kids. Her and you. Didn't you ever notice that?" "Not really, but now that you mention it, yeah. She's impulsive, but I never thought she'd do something like this." "Well, we'll figure it out," she said. "Dad, I don't ever want to be in the same house with that guy unless you're there. I don't care what you have to do, just make sure it doesn't happen, okay?" "I promise," I said. We picked up pizza on the way home, and I was enjoying my second slice when my phone buzzed. It was Bob, Rachel's dad. I wasn't expecting the call. I told Toby, and she said to put it on speaker. Bob got straight to the point. "Oliver, I don't know what's going on, but Rachel came over last night asking to stay with us." "Care to explain why?" Bob asked. "Did you ask her?" I replied. "She said you kicked her out," Bob answered. "Well, yeah, but," I began. "Did she tell you why?" Bob interrupted. "No, she said she'd explain later but wasn't ready yet," Bob said. "Don't you want to wait for her explanation?" I asked. "Can't you just tell me?" Bob pressed. "She's been having an affair with Jerry Garner, a guy from her work. They're both planning to divorce and get married," I explained. "What? That's insane, Oliver. How do you know that?" Bob asked, shocked. "I caught them together yesterday," I said. "And she admitted it." "Are you sure you didn't misunderstand?" Bob questioned. Toby suddenly chimed in. "Hey, Grandpa, I'm on speaker. There's no misunderstanding. I was there when she told Dad. I'm so sorry, Grandpa. I love you." Her voice broke as she started crying. Bob's voice cracked when he responded. "Don't cry, sweetheart. Please be strong. We love you, and Grandma does too. I'll try to talk some sense into your mom. Oliver, are you still there?" "Yeah. I'm really sorry, Bob, but don't worry about Toby. You'll always be her grandparents. That won't change. I know you love Rachel, and you'll do what you need to do. I have a lot of respect for you. I just hope you don't end up hating me when this is all over," I said, trying to reassure him. "That's never going to happen," Bob said firmly. "I'll figure out what's going on. Call me if you need anything." It went better than I'd feared. Life happens, and you just do your best. I won't go into detail about the divorce process. Most people know how it goes. It was long, painful, and never got easier. Rachel was delusional, thinking she'd get custody of Toby. That didn't happen. Miss Baxter was as good as her reputation. I got full custody because Toby wanted to live with me. After a private meeting with Toby, the judge ruled that Rachel would get unlimited visitation, but Toby wouldn't be left alone with her and Jerry Garner. In any case, it didn't matter anymore. His wife divorced him, but it seemed the whole soulmate thing was more of an exaggeration, at least on his part. Just 2 weeks after I discovered the affair, Jerry was already looking for his next conquest. All their grand plans disappeared like fog on a sunny day. The divorce took 7 months to finalize. Surprisingly, Rachel changed her mind. During the second court hearing, she asked the judge to schedule counseling. Neither Miss Baxter nor I had anything to say, and the judge ordered it. We were assigned 8 to 10 sessions. Our counselors were an odd pair of old hippies. In the first session, they asked us to state our goals. Rachel's goals were long and complicated. She seemed to believe I should understand that her happiness was the universe's main purpose, and that she desired only good things. My goal was much simpler. "What's your purpose for these sessions, Mr. Berryman?" the counselor asked. "My goal is to finish them," I said. The counselor frowned. "Mr. Berryman, do you really not want to address the issues that led your marriage to this point?" "I'm sorry, Mr. Rodman, but it wasn't my issues that caused this. I have no interest in working on them. I'm perfectly fine with my problems and plan to die with them." Rachel and Mr. Rodman were both horrified. Rachel spoke up quickly. "Oliver, how do you expect things to get back to normal if you won't even talk about it?" "I don't want to," I said. "Let me make this clear to both of you. I'm not here to fix anything or work on any problems. I'm here because the court ordered it. I'll do what I need to do, then we'll go back to court and finalize the divorce. That's my plan." "Do you realize if I report to the judge that you're refusing to cooperate, you could be held in contempt of court?" Mr. Rodman said. "I don't know about that," I replied. "You mean if you lie to the judge? These sessions are recorded. I'm sure my lawyer would love to subpoena you for perjury. I'm here. I'm doing what you ask. You asked for my goals, and I gave them. I'm cooperating." He blushed. "The judge likely expected you to work through your issues." "I'm not responsible for the judge's expectations," I said. "Only for my own." He tried to make it difficult by assigning tasks that required me to spend more time with Rachel, and she worked hard to wear me down. "Oliver, what would it take for you to give up the divorce and work things out?" she asked. "An act of God," I said. She waited for an explanation, but I said nothing. "What do you mean by an act of God?" she finally asked. "Well, if you can turn back time and avoid getting involved with Jerry, that would work. Otherwise, only God has that kind of power. Do you have some divine powers I don't know about, Rachel, besides your ability to attract other men?" We continued with the boring exercises and mantras, and finally it was over. Back in court, the judge asked if we had made any progress. "Your Honor, there is no chance my client will remain married to his wife," Elizabeth Baxter said. "We'd like to finalize the divorce as soon as possible. This process has gone on long enough." The judge must have agreed because the final order arrived in the mail 10 days later. Toby saw her mother often since she spent a lot of time with her grandparents. Occasionally, Rachel would plan something for the two of them, but their relationship was never the same. Toby spent most of her time with her friends, especially a petite blonde named Sabrina, who was practically part of our family. Sabrina was as sweet as she was cute, and I enjoyed having her around. They even started including me in their activities. One of their favorite activities was water skiing. We had a boat, and once summer vacation started, we'd go to a nearby lake on Saturdays. One Monday, they asked if we could spend the whole weekend at the lake, take the RV, and stay until Sunday evening. Since my schedule was free, I agreed. The girls spent the week planning, and by Thursday, we packed everything they wanted. On Friday afternoon, a new red Jeep Cherokee pulled into the driveway, and Sabrina jumped out. An almost identical woman stepped out from the driver's side, and Toby rushed to hug her. Sabrina and Toby led the nervous-looking woman over to me. "Dad," Toby said, "this is Julie. She's Sabrina's mom. I know you haven't met her yet." Julie extended her hand. "Hi, Oliver. The girls have told me so much about you. Thanks for inviting me along this weekend. Honestly, I was getting a little jealous that they were spending so much time with you and not me." She smiled playfully, and I instantly understood why Sabrina was such a charming little minx. I glanced at Toby, and she gave me a fierce look. My knees felt weak, and I knew when to surrender. The trembling got worse when I looked at Sabrina, who raised an eyebrow at me. "This is going to be great," I said to Julie, pulling myself together. "We always have a good time." Julie wasn't oblivious. She shifted her gaze from me to the girls, then back to me. "Oh my God," she said, realizing what was happening. "You didn't know, did you? The girls?" Before she could say anything else, she was engulfed in hugs, kisses, and pleas from Toby and Sabrina. "Please, Mom, don't worry about it. We're going to have so much fun," Sabrina said. "It's okay, Julie. Daddy's going to love you as much as I do, and he's a great guy," Toby added with a mischievous grin. Julie disentangled herself from the girls and gave me an apologetic look. "You two go sit on the porch. I need to talk to Oliver," she said, her tone firm but kind. The girls giggled as they obeyed, heading to the porch. "I'm so sorry, Oliver," Julie said, her face flushing red. I had no idea they were trying to set us up. I'll take Sabrina home. She'll be grounded for a month. This is so embarrassing. She looked so small and mortified that I stepped forward and hugged her. She tensed at first, but then relaxed into the embrace. Yeah, it's embarrassing, I admitted. But they're just kids. We both know they're trying to look out for us. Let me guess. You're single? She laughed softly and looked up at me with her big brown eyes. Yes, I am. Well, that's the point, right? You're packed, you've got the weekend free, and the lake will be amazing. I'm not a bad guy, as you've probably heard from Toby. Let's just go along with the girls' little plan. It'll be fun, and we can mess with them a bit too. What do you say? She hesitated for a second, glanced at the girls' eager faces, then smiled. Okay, let's go. I gave the girls a thumbs up, and they cheered, running toward us. I stopped them before they got too excited, grabbing each by the arm. Girls, that wasn't very nice, I said, trying to keep a straight face. Sabrina growled in her best Skeletor voice. I am not cute. We all burst out laughing and the tension broke. They were too sweet to stay mad at. We know what you're up to, I said. Stop it. Seriously, you can't just mess with people's lives like that. Yeah, but I love Jules, and I didn't know how to introduce you to her, Toby said, pouting. Well, you could have just told me, I said. She looked a little sad, so I softened. It's okay, kitten. Just don't do it again, all right? She brightened up immediately, and Sabrina tugged on my hand. Let's go. I can't wait. It's going to be disgusting, Oliver. You'll see. Julie laughed, a sound that lightened the mood. Sounds like it's going to be awesome, Ollie, she teased. But Sab's right. We're burning daylight. We loaded the bags into the Jeep and set off. After securing the boat and picking up propane, we hit the road. It was only about a half-hour drive to the lake. Julie sat up front with me while the girls sat in the back, playing awful music through their Bluetooth speakers. As we drove, Julie and I got to know each other better. It turned out she owned an insurance company and worked as a financial planner. I couldn't help but glance at her now and then. She was cute, petite, with light blonde hair that cascaded down to her waist. She looked younger than me, though she was only 3 years younger. Her large brown eyes, high cheekbones, and heart-shaped face made her look even more youthful. She was slender, dressed in jeans and a button-up top, with a tan that hinted at outdoor adventures. I wondered if Sabrina would look like her mom when she grew up. When we arrived at the lake, I set up the boat while the girls changed into their swimsuits. Julie came out last, and I nearly dropped what I was holding. She was stunning, slender but curvy in all the right places, with the same confident energy as her daughter, but with a maturity that made her even more attractive. She caught me staring and gave me a playful wink. Done? She asked, sparing me the awkwardness with a smile. For now, I replied, laughing. You know what you look like, Julie. I'm only human. We spent the next few hours water skiing. Julie turned out to be incredible at it, even steering the boat like a pro while I took my turn skiing. I wasn't as good as her or the girls, but I held my own. After skiing, we headed back to camp where the girls wanted to cook outside. We built a fire, grilled hot dogs, fried potatoes and onions, and opened a can of pork and beans. Camp food always tasted better, and the evening was perfect. We sat around the picnic table, talking as if we'd known each other for years. Julie, now Jules, as the girls called her, fit right in. She started calling me Ollie, and the girls kept dropping hints that Jules was single. Finally, I asked, So why hasn't some guy snatched you up yet, Jules? You're gorgeous, funny, smart, and you've got your own business. For a moment, she was quiet. Then she took a deep breath. Well, the main reason is Sabrina, she said. I was young and foolish, Ollie. I was in college and thought I'd found the love of my life. A week before graduation, I found out I was pregnant. I wasn't too upset because we had talked about getting married, but 3 days after I told Brad, I learned he'd been cheating on me. I dumped him and never looked back. When Sab was born, I didn't have time for a social life. By the time I could think about dating again, I realized I had this amazing gift, and I couldn't do anything without considering her. I get it, I said. I feel the same way about Toby. She's everything to me, especially over the past 18 months. She's kept me grounded. Julie placed her hand on mine. I know, she said softly. She tells Sab and me everything. I'm really sorry, Ollie. Yeah, I sighed. Life can be tough sometimes. We both sat in comfortable silence, looking up to see 2 pairs of approving eyes watching us from under the canopy. Toby and Sabrina were whispering and giggling, clearly pleased with themselves. I love your daughter, I told Julie. She feels like part of my family with how much time she spends here. She loves you too, Julie said, her voice catching. She told me the other day that you're like the father she never had. Her big brown eyes grew teary, and a tear slid down her cheek. I gently wiped it away with my finger. She's a great girl, I said, and her mom is an incredible woman for raising her so well, especially on her own. Julie smiled, then stood up and kissed me on the cheek before heading back to the girls. We had a wonderful weekend, and when it was time for them to leave, I walked Julie to her car. Just before she got in, I tapped on her window. "Jules, would you be interested in going out with me next Friday?" I asked, feeling a bit nervous. Sabrina squealed from inside the car, and Julie smiled brightly. "What time?" she asked. 6, I suggested. "We'll have dinner and find something fun to do." "Sounds great," she said, leaning in to kiss my cheek before driving off. When I got home, Toby was waiting for me. "Did you ask her out? Did you kiss her?" she asked, grinning. I wrapped my arms around her and gave her a playful pat. "That's for me to know, and none of your business," she squealed, and I heard Sabrina's echo from the car. "I knew it. She's perfect for you, Daddy. I love her so much, and Sabs is like a sister to me." I shrugged. "What happens, happens, Toby. You can't force it. Stop trying to be a matchmaker." She snuggled up against me. "I know, Daddy, but if I didn't do something, you'd never make a move. Not that I didn't like being the only girl in your life." I laughed. "You'll always have a special place in my heart that no one can take. You're my baby, and that'll never change." She purred contentedly, snuggled against me for a moment, and then went off to handle her own business. Our first date went well. I invited her to play racquetball. She was new to it, but she had played tennis before, so the mechanics were similar. Once she got the hang of the rules and hitting the ball off the walls, she did great. It didn't hurt that she was a natural athlete, fast and quick to change direction, which her petite size helped with. After our game, we sat down near the court, relaxed, and had a drink. Julie grabbed her phone. "Let's take a picture for the kids," she said. We posed with our rackets and goggles, snapped the photo, and sent it to them. They responded immediately, and it became a nice memory. Afterward, we both showered, and I took her out to dinner. We found a great Italian place and stuffed ourselves. Sitting in the booth, finishing our wine, Jules leaned into me, and it felt natural to put my arm around her. She nestled closer, smiling, and I realized how sweet she truly was, a quality that wouldn't fade with time. When we pulled up to her house, she leaned toward me expectantly. I realized she wanted me to kiss her, so I did. I wanted it as much as she did, maybe more. The kiss was long and wonderful. Her lips were soft and sweet, tasting of wine and cherry chapstick. As we pulled apart, I noticed the drapes moving. "I think we've got an audience," I said. She giggled, sounding just like her daughter. Or maybe her daughter was like her. "I'm not surprised. You know they're trying to set us up, right?" "Is that okay with you?" I asked. She blushed. "Yes. I like everything I've learned about you, Ollie." "Same here," I said. "We'd better go inside before they tear the curtains down." We met every Friday for 4 months, getting closer and closer, and I wanted our relationship to grow. I didn't want to pressure her, but some of our dates were getting pretty heated toward the end. At the same time, I found that I enjoyed her friendship almost as much as I liked having her as my girlfriend. We were constantly chatting on the phone, texting funny things, or just a few words throughout the day. If I saw or heard something I knew would make Jules laugh, I had to share it with her. We became very close, knowing everything about each other's lives. We started having dinner together every Tuesday, all of us, playing games and just hanging out. And I was growing as fond of Sabrina as I was of her mom. They were so alike, if you knew one, you pretty much knew the other. The differences were small, but only emphasized how similar they really were. Both were utterly adorable. Life was great, except for Rachel's constant presence. She was still part of Toby's life, which meant she was still part of mine. I wanted nothing to do with her, and seeing her irritated me. Every time she came to pick up Toby, or when I dropped her off at her grandparents', Rachel would try to talk to me. She was still living with them, along with Jerry. She had lost her job at the clinic and was now working at another clinic across town. If she annoyed me too much, I'd ask if she'd heard from Jerry, which shut her up quickly. "How long is it going to take for you to forgive me?" she asked one time. "Forgive you for what?" I replied. "As far as I know, you don't think you've done anything wrong. I've never heard—" "Forgive me, Oliver, I was wrong. I'm sorry for trying to make Toby think you were a liar. I'm sorry for trying to take her away from you, for trying to screw you in the divorce. And most of all, I've never heard. I'm sorry I cheated behind your back." I didn't hear it that time either. She just couldn't take responsibility for her actions. I wasn't even sure what forgiveness would mean in this situation. I'd come to terms with it and calmed down. I hadn't forgotten, but I wasn't going to waste energy being bitter. People have the right to make mistakes. They can divorce you, dump you, end friendships. It's their choice. You just accept it and move forward. People do crappy things every day. At one point, I wanted to punish her and Jerry, but I realized quickly that their punishment was simply being who they were. They had to live with themselves, while I planned to live with myself. That meant leaving the lies and betrayal in the past and focusing on living my best life. Rachel was miserable, and as for Jerry, I wished him all the misfortune in the world, but it wouldn't come from me. I'd let karma or the universe take care of them. Rachel got even more upset when she found out I was dating Jules. One time, after I dropped Toby off at her grandparents' house, Rachel stopped me as I was getting into my car. "I heard you're dating the mother of one of Toby's friends," she said. I just stared at her. "Is it true?" she pressed. "That's none of your business," I told her. "Like hell it isn't," she snapped. "I'm your wife. I have a right to know." "You have a right to nothing," I replied. "You're not my wife anymore. You found your soulmate, remember? And it wasn't me." Then came the divorce. "My business isn't yours anymore, and yours isn't mine. Stay out of it, Rachel." I left fuming. That woman just couldn't leave things alone. I told Toby what had happened, and she was just as angry as I was. From then on, I arranged for her grandparents, Bob or Cindy, to pick her up. That took away a major source of stress for me. On the 7-month anniversary of our lake trip, I asked Jules out for a special date. We went to a nice restaurant and then to a club. She didn't drink much, usually just a beer or a single drink, but that night, she had 2. I raised an eyebrow when she ordered the second one, and she laughed. "Yeah, I'm feeling wild and crazy today, huh?" "You're perfect, just like always," I told her. "Do you really think so, Ollie?" she asked, tilting her head. "Because I think you're pretty perfect, too." "If I'm so perfect, why haven't you asked me to spend the night?" she teased. I must have looked shocked because she laughed. "What? Didn't you even think about it?" I gathered my thoughts. Yeah, Jules. I've been thinking about it since the first day I saw you on the boat in that bikini. But as we started dating, I realized you were special, and I didn't want to push you or scare you off." "You won't scare me off," she said. "I told the girls not to wait up." "Really? Then what are we still doing here?" I asked, excited. "Oh my God, Jules, let's get out of here. Do you want to spend the night with me?" She blushed, took my hand, and let me help her up. More than anything else in the world right now. She practically cuddled up to me as we got out of the car, holding onto my arm the whole way home with her head resting on my shoulder. When we pulled into the garage, I let her out, and she stayed close to my side all the way to the bedroom. We fell asleep in each other's arms, making love twice during the night, once on my initiative, once on hers. I woke up the next morning on my back with her half lying on top of me, her hair spread over both of us, and her cheek resting on my shoulder. I gently played with her hair, watching her sleep until she finally opened her eyes. "My place is here, Ollie." "I know," I replied. "Would you like to wake up here every morning?" she asked, looking at me. "You mean living together?" "No, honey, well, yes, but what I mean is, will you marry me, Julie Barnes?" She raised her small left hand between us, wiggling her fingers. "Ooh," she said. "Something seems to be missing." "Hold that thought," I said, starting to get out of bed. "I'll hold that thought," she replied. "But I can't hold anything else. I need to pee so badly." I laughed. "Go ahead. I'll meet you back here." She scurried off, and I went down to my office, remembering to use the bathroom along the way. I grabbed what I needed from the safe and returned to find her curled up under the blanket. I climbed back into bed, took her left hand again, and looked into her eyes, seeing only love. "Okay, Julie, will you marry me?" I asked, sliding the ring onto her finger. It was a bit too big and would need to be resized, but for the moment, it was perfect. She took the ring, examined it, and smiled. "It's beautiful," she said. "It looks antique. Where did you get it? When did you buy it?" "Remember when I told you I was going to that auction about a month ago?" I asked. "Yes, I remember. They were auctioning off the estate, right?" "Exactly. I didn't mention it at the time, but I saw this ring in the catalog. I went there specifically to buy it and ask you to marry me. It was made in England around 1810 for the Duchess of Avon. It has a long history. Do you like it?" "I love it," she said. It's the most beautiful ring I've ever seen." "So, are you going to answer my question?" I asked with a smile. "What?" "Oh, yes, Oliver. Yes, I'll marry you." "Oh my God, yes." I laughed and pulled her into a tight hug. It felt like a weight had finally been lifted. The long road I had walked, filled with anger, betrayal, and loss, was finally behind me. Rachel was out of my life, and though the scars would always remain, I had moved forward. I had found someone who brought joy, laughter, and meaning back into my days. Jules was my partner in every sense of the word, and together we were building a future, one filled with warmth and love. As we started planning our wedding, life felt lighter. Toby was thriving, Sabrina was like a second daughter to me, and Jules made me believe in happiness again. It wasn't just about finding love, but rediscovering a part of myself that had been buried under years of resentment and disappointment. The lake trips became a regular part of our lives, and every time we went, I found myself more at peace. The laughter, the quiet moments, the family we had formed, they were all reminders that life, no matter how painful it might seem at times, always had the potential to offer something beautiful on the other side. Rachel had her life, and I had mine. For the first time in a long time, I could say with certainty, I was happy. Truly happy. The darkness had passed, and now, in its place, was a life I wanted to live. A life I chose, with the people who mattered most. And that was enough.
Welcome to Lost Relation Chronicles.
Melinda woke late. She lay there a second smiling, remembering the night before. Ken, her husband, had just got home from a 2-week trip, the longest he had been away from her son in their 9-year marriage. He played and tussled with their 7-year-old son until his manic joy of his dad being home faded. Then a simple dinner and off to bed. Later, as quiet descended on the house, she snuggled gently with him on the sofa. "I hope you left a little energy for us," she whispered as she stroked his cheek. 2 weeks' worth, my love. I swear. If this trip hadn't worked out, I was ready to give up. We don't need the money that bad for me to ever be away from you, and Kenny that long ever again. She smiled in the muted light, wondering how many CEO husbands would have made that statement. And she knew he meant every word. When they went to bed, each thought to constrain their passion, but it was a lost cause. They mated like tigers, hard, fast, giving in to the primal urges they felt. Later, they explored each other's bodies like they were trying to reclaim their territory, moving languidly over every square inch. Waking again later, they made love with passion and joy. She didn't see how he made it into work that morning. "Just an update, honey. Then I intend to take 4 days off and spend every minute loving on you and Kenny." His kiss held a lot of promise. She rose, bathed, slipped into his favorite sundress. The housekeeper was to get Kenny off to school, to give her a chance to sleep in. She heard the soft bong repeat 3 times and stop, then repeat as she brushed her hair. It was a state-of-the-art system. That pattern meant an intruder was in the house. At first, she thought Mrs. Miller had forgot to reset it when she took Kenny to school. It was a bad habit she had. But she remembered the repeated admonitions from her husband about never taking anything for granted. So she went to check. There was a man in her kitchen, with his head in the fridge. A man she didn't recognize. "Who are you? What do you want?" The man turned around with a bottle of orange juice and poured a glass before he spoke. "May I pour you a glass?" "No? All right then. You can call me Dave." "Yes, Dave. I've always liked that name. And I'm the man who kidnapped your son." "Sure. You don't want some juice?" It took a second for his words to register. "What?" He smirked. "I've kidnapped your son. Well, not me, physically. My partner did the actual deed. It's my responsibility to handle negotiations. You know, arrange payments, the return of your son, that sort of thing." He was surprised at her calm. "How do I know you aren't just bluffing?" He sighed and handed her his phone. There was a picture of Kenny, bound and gagged, on what looked like the floor of a van. She paled a little. "What do you want?" she asked in a shaky voice. The man smiled widely. "Not much, really. Just all your liquid assets. I've done my research. Here's a list." He slid the paper. It was pretty accurate. Bank balances, stock portfolios, safety deposit boxes. It also had the instructions of where to send the money. "Isn't technology grand?" he said, openly grinning. "We'll go to the bank first, for the deposit boxes, then we'll come back here for the transfers. While we're waiting, you and I will have a little fun." My own personal bonus, so to speak. If you fight me or refuse, my partner will get a call. He'll curd his thumb off. Do we understand each other? Cold fury blazed from her eyes, but she nodded. Let me get my purse. He smiled and held the juice glass up. Melinda came back, and they walked out on her deck. Dave looked at her car. Wow, a CTSV Cadillac. I always wanted to drive one of those. You don't mind, do you? She reached into her purse, but instead of keys came out with a Ruger .22 target pistol. Dave jumped back, waving his arms. Now, lady, don't do anything foolish. It's just money. She leveled the pistol and fired off a round. Shooting his little toe on his right foot off, he was screaming, rolling across the deck. He rolled close to her, and she raked the pistol across his cheek, opening up a pretty deep gash. She walked over to the hot tub and got some towels, tossing them to him. It's not just money. It's my child, you a-hole. Now, wrap these towels around it to stop the bleeding. And stop crying like a little witch. He managed to get into a chair and started ranting about what was going to happen to her son. She aimed the pistol right between his eyes. Whoa, lady, stop. We can work something out. She smiled, and with her pale skin and the white sundress, he thought she looked like the angel of death. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to pull your phone out, call your partner, and deliver my son back to me. If he's over 15 minutes away, I shoot you again. You have 3 minutes. Dave ranted. He cursed. He stalled. When the 3 minutes were up, she shot him in the top of his wounded foot. He screamed and cried. She tossed him more towels. 3 minutes, then it's through the ankle. Next 3 minutes, the kneecap. 3 minutes later, I blow off one of your balls. 3 minutes later, the other ball. After that, I'll consider you a lost cause and watch you bleed out. He looked at her with sheer hatred, but dialed the phone. We're done here. Bring him back and dump him at end of the drive. I'll meet you there. Be gentle. She was standing beside him, listening because she made him put it on speaker. She jammed the barrel in his ear. If be gentle is code for come in with guns blazing or hurt my son, and you won't live past noon. You understand? Screw you. I'm gonna call the cops. Her smile got bigger. Do you know who my husband is? He's retired Army. Intelligence branch. His company has only one customer, the U.S. government. Threatening me and kidnapping my son will be considered terrorists. I hope you like tropical climates. You and your buddy will most likely end up in Gitmo, never to be seen again. I'll ask a favor and put you in with the real terrorists. That should be a lot of fun for you. Dave sneered through his pain. It'll be your word against mine. I disabled your security system. She laughed again. You mean that bundle of wires we have for show? The real system is wireless state-of-the-art with a satellite feed. I press one button on my phone, and it streams instantly to my husband and the military. She kept her cell on, and soon saw the van pull up to the front and stop. A man got out without her child, holding a shotgun. She showed Dave. Call him and tell him to drop any weapons he has. If you don't, and I shoot him, my son better be in that van. If he isn't, you're about to live a very painful existence. Dave believed her. He called, telling his partner to stow the weapons and bring the child. The other man was huge, burly with muscles. He was smiling until he saw Dave with bloody towels over his foot and the woman holding the pistol. That's right, sugar. Just send him on up to me and everything will be fine. Damn, she thought. She had tried for years to erase her southern accent, and it still popped out when she was really stressed. He hesitated until Dave warned him. Don't do anything dumb, man. She'll kill you. She looked at her son lying in his arms. Anger threatened to consume her. What's wrong with him? Relax, lady. We knocked him out with gas. He'll wake up in about an hour with a little headache. We've never hurt one yet. She realized she was grinding her teeth, something she hadn't done since she was in her teens. Forcing herself to center, she turned to Dave. You don't mind waiting on us for just a bit, do you, Dave? I waited until we were outside before I shot you. Do you know how expensive Brazilian hardwood floors are? I'm not going to clean blood off them. We'll be right back. She marched the big man into her son's room and had him lay him on the bed. While he was bent over, she put the pistol up against his a-hole. Where's my housekeeper? The thought of getting shot in the ass scared the guy half to death. She's not hurt. She got a text from your number telling her to take the day off. You wanted some time with your husband. She filed that away in her memory. This seemed to well plan to be the idea of the two she was dealing with. Dave had to be helped back to the van. He was groaning in pain. The big man looked at her with sheer hatred. She surprised him by shooting him in his thigh. He screamed. Oh, shut up. I didn't hit an artery. You won't bleed out, but it'll be a while before you can run again. Too bad, too. In roughly 3 hours, when my husband gets home, I'm going to tell him all about my interesting day and show him the video. There will be no place you can hide, no rock big enough to crawl under. He'll find you, and when he does, what I did to you will look like a walk in the park. He'll never forgive you for touching his son. So shoo, try to hide. If I know my husband and his team, they'll start a pool on how many hours it takes to find you, and how many hours it'll take before he decides to put you out of your misery. She made a little dismissive wave of her hand. Go on, now, shoo. Every minute you waste will bring him one more minute closer to you. Thanks for the entertaining morning. She watched them pull out, then walked back up on her deck, stopping to look at the blood-stained boards. She went inside and called a company construction business. They assured her the boards would be replaced by the next afternoon. She checked on her son, making sure he was all right. His regular breathing reassured her, and she went into the kitchen to call her husband. You saw? Her husband tried to stifle his laughter. When their alarm went off, it automatically notified his computer and started streaming. He had watched the whole thing unfold. Well played. There was a team there in 20 minutes. I sure you saw the laser light on his chest once or twice. They had orders to stay out of it unless you gave the signal. You shouldn't have promised the time. The team is on them now. They went to a vet, obviously someone they knew. He refused them until the guns came out. She kept her tone neutral. I thought it would give you a little diversion, Major. She could hear the anger vibrating through the phone. They kidnapped my son and had every intention of raping my wife. Do you think I feel sporting? She had seen him in this state twice. She knew no argument in the world would stay him. No, honey, I didn't. Will you be home for dinner? 6 on the dot. I love you, honey. And I you. More than I can express. She went to check on her child. He was awake. What happened, Mom? I was waiting for Mrs. James to take me to school, and some guy came to the door. Then I wake up here. You got sick, honey. Must be that virus going around. The man was here to upgrade our cable, and he helped get you into bed. How do you feel? He rubbed his head, saying it hurt. She gave him some child-grade Tylenol and fussed over him all day. When his father got home, he hugged them both a little harder than normal. The man known as Dave sat in a pain-induced fog, listening to his wife rant. One little woman, and you let her get away with shooting you? You're a chicken, Dave. A real man would have shoved that pistol up her butt. Didn't want to do that, did you? You were thinking about shoving something else up there, weren't you? I know you play with them. It didn't matter as long as you bring the money home. She was throwing things into suitcases, packing away her computers. It was time to move. They usually came into town, hit 2 scores, and got out. This had been their first in the area, and it hadn't turned out well. This had been the first failure in the 9 times they had tried it. She had a goal. 4 million. That would have let her retire to some island, preferably one without an extradition treaty, and live well. She had no intention of sharing it with Dave or his friend. She gave them a few thousand here and there, just enough to keep them motivated. She was sure once she left, they would try it again and fail. Jail was most likely their future. They left the van. It was stolen anyway. She had no idea there was already a GPS and listening devices installed. It took a month for Dave and his buddy to heal enough to try another score, and they were still moving slow. When they tried to snatch the child, 5 men in tactical gear surrounded them. No identification was offered. 3 more grabbed the woman. Ken looked into the cell. It was in a basement. The woman sat up when the lights came on. She had been there 5 days and was allowed 2 hours of light when she was fed. The rest of the time was spent in total darkness. She was naked, and the temperature was set at a steady 58 degrees. She shivered for 2 days before she acclimated. She was fed 1,500 calories a day and had already lost 6 pounds. No one had spoken a word to her the whole time. They just shoved the trays through the door and picked up the empty trays later. He had her brought to an interrogation room, still naked. He looked at her critically. 30s, probably pretty if she was dressed well and had a little makeup. She sat there, chained, as he looked at her. The silence lasted 5 minutes before she spoke. Please. He sat for another few minutes before she said it again. Please what? Please help me. Get me some clothes. Let me talk to a lawyer. I'll plead guilty. Please. He looked at her a second, then unlocked one hand. He gave her a bottle of water and an apple. She surprised him by eating the apple slowly, with obvious relish. Do you know who I am? No, sir. I'm the husband of the woman who shot your cohorts. The father of the boy you kidnapped. She paled. Please, we never hurt anybody. It was just for the money. He shuffled through some papers on the table. Let's see. You stole a little over 3 million from 8 families. 2 lost their businesses. One woman committed suicide. We recovered all their money, but it didn't really matter by then. 8 women were raped. There were 3 divorces. Still think you didn't hurt anybody? She slumped down in defeat. What are you going to do with me? I don't know yet. You're probably going to get your wish. It'll be warm and tropical. You'll even have a view of the beach. Unfortunately, it'll be through a chain-link fence. You'll be very popular as the only woman there. She paled. Please, don't. I'll do anything. He smiled. Be careful. Anything encompasses a lot. There are other agencies that might be interested in you. It won't be a pleasant life, and it may take years, but you might eventually be able to live another life. I'll take it. She sobbed. Please don't put me back in the dark. She looked up as she was led away. I'm sorry. He nodded, thinking. You will be, which, for years to come. Dave looked up, blinking in the sunshine. Where are we? The guard laughed. Beautiful Cuba. Enjoy your stay. He curled up in a ball on his bunk that night, worrying. Soon he was surrounded. Look, Faisal, a present. Shall we show her our favorite positions? He opened his mouth to scream when something was stuffed in his mouth. No teeth, a voice hissed. Ken snuggled into Melinda, enjoying the fire, watching it snow. Kenny almost couldn't sleep, thinking about sledding with his friends the next day. He was stroking her cheek gently. What did they say when they got the money back? Most of them were happy. A few were so destroyed that it didn't matter. They were all pleased that they were caught. Where are they now? He grinned. Glad she couldn't see his expression. The big one was dumb enough to fight. He had 8 wounds. Any one of them would have been fatal. I don't know which agency took the woman. Don't care. Dave went to Gitmo. I'm pretty sure both of them will be spending quite a bit of time on their knees in the near future. Good. She reached up and kissed him. Then she did something that was almost impossible to do. She surprised her husband. Honey, I went to the doctor today. It's a girl. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
A few days after my father's funeral, I found myself cornered in the living room by my husband, Ethan, and his mother, Margot. Leah, Margot said, her voice cutting through the air like a blade, you need to transfer everything your father left, $100 million and the estate, into Ethan's name. It's what's best for the family. My heart pounded as I stared at her, shocked. The words felt surreal, as if I were trapped in a nightmare. No, I said, my voice trembling but firm. My father left this to me, and I'm not giving it to anyone. Before I could react, Ethan's face turned red with rage. In an instant, he yanked my hair and slapped me hard across the face. The sting burned my cheek, but the betrayal cut far deeper. And it didn't end there. What happened next was even more dangerous. Hello. My voice is steady despite the memories flooding back. My name is Leah, and I am 30 years old. This is my story, a story of betrayal, resilience, and the strength it takes to rebuild from ashes. It's not just my story, but also one of my father's love and sacrifices, which became the foundation of everything I am today. 5 years ago, life seemed simpler. I lived with my husband, Ethan, and his mother, Margot, in a modest house on the outskirts of Brookhaven. At first glance, it might have appeared like an ideal family setup, but beneath the surface, there was a price to pay, one that only I truly understood. You see, my presence in their home wasn't based on love or unity, but on silent sacrifices. My father, Samuel, was the one who bore the weight of our household expenses. Month after month, he sent money to ensure everything ran smoothly. Never once did he complain, but I could see the toll it took on him, how he skipped small luxuries and worked tirelessly to support me, his only daughter. Margot, an authoritative and calculating woman, ensured her dominance was never questioned. Leah, it's for the family, she would say whenever I protested. Your father can afford it, so why not keep things comfortable for everyone? Her words, veiled in condescension, left no room for disagreement. Ethan, my husband, rarely intervened. His silence felt like a betrayal, too, his indifference a sharp contrast to the promises we once exchanged. Despite the suffocating environment, I stayed. I clung to the hope that things would improve, that love would outweigh the financial strings tethering me to this family. But as the years passed, My relationship with Ethan felt increasingly transactional, and my father's quiet sacrifices began to weigh on my conscience. Then came the day that changed everything. One morning, as I prepared breakfast, my phone rang. It was a call I never expected, a call that would alter the course of my life forever. "I'm so sorry, Leah," the voice on the other end said. "Your father, he passed away this morning. A sudden heart attack." The world stopped spinning. My father, my protector and anchor, was gone. I felt my knees buckle, the weight of grief too heavy to bear. For days, I moved like a ghost, my mind consumed with memories of him. He had always been there for me, and now, in the most profound way, he was gone. The days following my father's death were an unbearable haze of grief and numbness. It felt as though the world had lost its color, leaving me in muted, endless gray. Amid the mourning, I received a call from my father's lawyer, Mr. Grant, who asked to meet me regarding my father's will. I wasn't ready to confront the legalities of his passing, but I knew I couldn't avoid it forever. Sitting across from Mr. Grant in his quiet, book-lined office, I listened in disbelief as he explained the contents of my father's final wishes. "Leah, your father left you his entire estate," he said, sliding a stack of neatly organized papers toward me. "This includes a sum of $100 million and his property in Brookhaven." My breath caught. Brookhaven's estate wasn't just any property. It was a sprawling mansion nestled in one of the city's most prestigious neighborhoods. I had known my father was successful, but the magnitude of his wealth was overwhelming. "He wanted to ensure your future was secure," Mr. Grant continued. "He was very clear that this inheritance is solely for you." I nodded, barely able to comprehend the weight of his words. This wasn't just wealth. It was a symbol of my father's love and sacrifices. Though the money was significant, it didn't fill the gaping void left by his absence. When I returned to the house I shared with Ethan and Margot, I made the decision to keep the inheritance a secret for now. It felt deeply personal, a gift from my father meant to protect me. But secrets have a way of revealing themselves, especially when those around you are watching closely. It wasn't long before Ethan and Margot began to notice subtle changes. My quiet trips to the estate, my meetings with the lawyer, and the documents I carefully organized. All piqued their curiosity. Margot, ever the sharp observer, was the first to bring it up. "Leah," she said casually one evening over dinner, her tone laced with forced politeness, "what exactly did your father leave you? He must have had some assets, right?" I hesitated, her question feeling like a trap. Ethan's eyes were fixed on me, his usual disinterest replaced with pointed attentiveness. I decided to answer cautiously. "He left me some money and a property," I said, keeping my response vague. Margot's expression didn't change, but I saw the gleam of interest flash in her eyes. Ethan leaned forward slightly, his tone uncharacteristically warm. "That's generous," he said. "A property in Brookhaven? That must be something." I nodded, giving nothing away, but I could already feel the shift in their demeanor. Their curiosity soon turned into an unsettling attentiveness. Margot's sharp remarks softened into compliments, and Ethan began acting like the caring husband I had longed for. Yet I couldn't shake the feeling that their kindness was calculated. Weeks passed, and Ethan and Margot's newfound kindness became increasingly unsettling. Small comments and subtle hints evolved into direct questions about my inheritance. Their probing felt invasive, and their motives were becoming alarmingly clear. "Leah," Margot said one afternoon as we sat in the living room sipping tea, her voice carrying an air of faux concern, "you've been through so much lately. Your father would want you to use his legacy wisely, for the benefit of the family." Ethan, seated beside me, placed a hand on my shoulder in a gesture that felt more possessive than comforting. "Exactly," he chimed in. "We're a team, Leah. We can help you manage everything. You don't have to handle this burden alone." The word burden struck me. My father's inheritance wasn't a burden. It was a gift meant to secure my independence. Their insistence that it was something to be managed by them only deepened my suspicions. The pretense of their concern couldn't last forever. One evening, as I was organizing some paperwork in the living room, Margot and Ethan entered with uncharacteristically serious expressions. Gone was the veneer of kindness. They were done pretending. Leah, Margot began, her tone commanding, it's time we talked about what's best for this family. You need to transfer the estate and the money to Ethan's name. It's the logical thing to do. I froze, the weight of her demand sinking in.
What?
I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Ethan stepped forward, his expression cold and resolute. You heard her. You're part of this family, Leah. What's yours should be ours. Transfer everything. I took a step back, my heart pounding. No, I said, summoning every ounce of courage I had. My father left this for me. It's his legacy, and I won't let you take it. Ethan's jaw clenched, his temper flaring. Margot crossed her arms, her eyes narrowed. Don't be foolish, Leah, she snapped. We've done everything for you. It's time you repay us. Her words struck a nerve, igniting a mix of anger and fear within me. Repay you, I said, my voice trembling. Everything my father sacrificed for this family, and now you want to take his legacy too? No, I won't do it. Ethan's face contorted with rage. In a flash, he lunged toward me, grabbing my arm with such force that it left me breathless. You think you can just say no, he snarled, his grip tightening painfully. Let me go, I shouted, struggling to free myself, but instead of releasing me, he yanked me by the hair and slapped me hard across the face. The impact sent me stumbling backward. You will transfer everything to me, he yelled, his voice echoing through the room. You owe this family, Leah. We've done everything for you. Margot watched from the side, her arms crossed, her expression cold and unfeeling. Don't make this harder than it needs to be, she said, her tone dripping with disdain. That money belongs to this family, not just you. I clutched my burning cheek, tears streaming down my face. But even through the pain, I refused to back down. No, I said, my voice breaking but firm. You can threaten me all you want, but I will never give you what my father left me. Ethan's fury reached a boiling point.
Fine, he spat.
If you won't do this willingly, then you're no longer welcome here. Pack your things and get out. I'm done with you. Margot smirked, clearly satisfied with the outcome. Don't expect any sympathy, Leah. You brought this on yourself. Tears blurred my vision as I stumbled toward my room. My heart raced, and my mind was a whirlwind of emotions. Pain, fear, anger, and a growing resolve. I had given everything to this family, and this was how they repaid me. As I packed my belongings, I realized this was no longer just about my inheritance, it was about reclaiming my dignity and my life. Ethan appeared at the door moments later, divorce papers in hand. He thrust them toward me with a sneer. Sign these before you leave, he said coldly. You're nothing without this family. Good luck surviving on your own. I snatched the papers from him, refusing to let him see my tears. I don't need your luck, I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. And I don't need you. By the time I left the house that night, I felt a strange sense of relief mixed with devastation. My father's sprawling estate in Brookhaven became my refuge, a safe haven where I could begin to heal. But even amidst the safety of my new surroundings, the bruises on my face and the ache in my heart served as constant reminders of Ethan and Margot's cruelty. In the quiet of my new home, I realized I couldn't let them get away with what they had done. Their greed and violence had gone too far, and it was time for me to take a stand. The very next morning, I sought legal counsel. My lawyer, Andrew, listened intently as I recounted every detail, from their sudden demands for my inheritance to the physical abuse I endured when I refused. This isn't just a case of inheritance, Andrew said, his tone firm. It's about abuse, coercion, and manipulation. We have enough here to build a strong case. He advised me to document everything, the bruises, the threats, and even the text messages Ethan and Margot had sent in their attempts to intimidate me. I also filed for a restraining order against both of them, ensuring they couldn't come near me or my property. Knowing I had the law on my side gave me a sense of empowerment I hadn't felt in years. However, Ethan and Margot didn't back down easily. They tried to intimidate me through mutual acquaintances, and even attempted to enter my property one night. But the restraining order was already in place, and when they showed up uninvited, I called the police. Watching them be escorted off the premises was a small but satisfying victory. The legal battle began soon after when Ethan contested my father's will, claiming that as my husband, he was entitled to a portion of the inheritance. His argument was weak, built on lies and entitlement, and Andrew dismantled it piece by piece in court. Margot, ever the manipulative figure, tried to sway the proceedings, but her arrogance became her downfall. During the trial, the evidence of their abuse became the turning point. Photographs of my bruised face, witnesses who had overheard their threats, and text messages demanding the inheritance painted a damning picture of their greed and malice. The courtroom was silent as the judge delivered the verdict. Based on the evidence presented, it is clear that the inheritance left by Leah's father was intended solely for her, the judge declared. Furthermore, the actions of Ethan and Margot demonstrate coercion, abuse, and harassment, for which they must be held accountable. A wave of relief washed over me as the judge ruled in my favor, upholding my right to the full inheritance and the estate. But that wasn't all. Punitive damages were awarded for the abuse and emotional trauma I had endured. Ethan and Margot would face the consequences of their cruelty. Ethan was charged with domestic abuse and sentenced to community service, along with mandatory anger management classes. His attempts to manipulate the legal process had backfired spectacularly. Margot, on the other hand, was fined heavily for harassment and ordered to stay away from me permanently. Their smug arrogance had finally been stripped away, and justice had been served. As I left the courthouse that day, I felt an overwhelming sense of closure. The bruises they left, both physical and emotional, would take time to heal, but I could finally begin to rebuild my life without their shadow looming over me. The peace of my father's estate became a sanctuary where I could focus on the future. But as I walked through the grand halls and sprawling gardens, I realized this wasn't just a place to heal. It was an opportunity to honor my father's memory in a meaningful way. My father had always spoken about giving back to the community, and I wanted to continue his legacy of generosity. After weeks of reflection and planning, I decided to transform the estate into a shelter for women who had endured domestic abuse. I knew firsthand how isolating and terrifying such experiences could be, and I wanted to create a space where others could find solace and strength. Renovating the estate was both exhausting and fulfilling. Each room was designed with care, ensuring it felt warm and welcoming. The gardens became a tranquil space for reflection, and partnerships with local organizations provided counseling, legal aid, and job training for the women who sought refuge here. It was a labor of love, and every detail reflected the spirit of compassion my father had instilled in me. The shelter officially opened its doors months later, and soon the house was filled with the stories of women reclaiming their lives. Among them was Grace, a young mother escaping an abusive marriage, and Eleanor, a retired teacher who had been financially exploited by her relatives. Their courage and resilience inspired me, reminding me of my own journey. One evening, as I walked through the gardens, a familiar voice called out to me. "Leah," it said softly. Turning, I saw Daniel, my childhood friend, standing with a warm smile. "Daniel," I said, surprised but happy. "What brings you here?" "I heard about what you're doing here," he said, gesturing to the estate. "I wanted to see it for myself and to see you." We spent hours catching up, reminiscing about our childhood, and sharing stories of the challenges we had faced as adults. Daniel's kindness and sincerity were a stark contrast to the chaos I had endured with Ethan and Margot. His presence brought a sense of calm I hadn't felt in years. As the weeks passed, Daniel became a steady presence at the estate. He volunteered his time helping with repairs, organizing fundraisers, and even mentoring some of the women. His selflessness and support warmed my heart in ways I hadn't thought possible after everything I had been through. One crisp autumn evening, as the sun set over the sprawling gardens, Daniel led me to a quiet spot under the canopy of golden trees. His voice was steady, but tinged with nervousness. "Leah, what you've built here is extraordinary," he began, his gaze locking with mine. You've inspired me in ways I can't even describe. I've always cared for you, and I want to be part of this life you're creating. Will you marry me? Tears welled up in my eyes, this time not from pain, but from the overwhelming joy of finding someone who truly valued and respected me. Yes, Daniel, I said, my voice steady, but filled with emotion. I would love to marry you. Our wedding was a simple but beautiful affair, held in the very gardens where Daniel had proposed. Surrounded by the women who had become like family to me, we exchanged vows of love, partnership, and hope for the future. For the first time in years, I felt a profound sense of peace and happiness.
I usually don't ask this early, but if you could like the video and subscribe, it would mean a lot. We're so close to hitting 1,000 subscribers, and your support can really help get my content out there. Thanks. James Hargrove. A 35-year-old marketing executive from Manchester, loyal, hardworking, and deeply in love with his wife. He has a sharp mind for business and prides himself on being practical and grounded. His steady nature contrasts with the emotional whirlwind that will soon engulf him. Emily Hargrove. A 32-year-old interior designer who loves the finer things in life. She's vivacious, charming, and always up for a night out with friends. Though she once adored James, she's begun to crave something more exciting, and this thirst for thrill leads her down a dangerous path. Mark Walters. A 38-year-old wealthy businessman who thrives on adventure and risk. He's charismatic, handsome, and manipulative, knowing exactly how to woo women like Emily. He exudes confidence, and his forbidden allure is what draws Emily toward him. James Hargrove thought he had it all: a loving wife, a good job, and a future filled with promise. He and Emily had been married for 7 years, building a life together in their suburban Manchester home. To James, they were the perfect couple. They laughed together, traveled when they could, and shared their dreams of starting a family soon. But behind closed doors, things weren't as perfect as they seemed. Emily had changed. What was once spontaneous passion turned into routine, and the connection they had in their early years now felt like a distant memory. James, ever trusting, chalked it up to the natural progression of a long-term relationship. Everyone hit rough patches, right? But little did he know, the change in Emily wasn't just a phase. It was something much deeper, something he was about to uncover in the most devastating way possible. James sat in the kitchen, his laptop open, sipping his coffee as he replied to some work emails. Emily was out, again. Lately, she'd been out more and more, saying she was catching up with old friends, or had interior design projects that required late-night consultations. James had never doubted her before, but he couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something was wrong. It started small. Emily's phone, which used to sit on the kitchen counter or by her side, was now always in her hand, face down. The once loving texts she'd send him throughout the day had become brief and to the point. Conversations about their future had dwindled, and the playful banter that once filled their evenings had given way to silence. One night after Emily had come home unusually late, James decided to ask her directly. "Emily, is everything okay between us?" His voice was soft, filled with concern. She looked up from her phone, her face a mask of indifference. "What do you mean?" "I don't know. You've just been distant lately." Emily sighed and set her phone down. "James, it's nothing. I've just been busy with work. You know how demanding clients can be." James wanted to believe her, but his gut told him otherwise. Yet, he nodded, not wanting to push the issue further. It wasn't long after that conversation when James met Mark Walters for the first time. He and Emily had been invited to a dinner party hosted by one of her friends, Sarah, in the city center. James had never been particularly fond of these social gatherings, but he knew Emily enjoyed them. So he went along. The party was held in Sarah's lavish flat in Deansgate, filled with people James didn't recognize. As the evening wore on, James found himself in a conversation with a group of men discussing football, while Emily flitted about, charming everyone with her wit and laughter. She looked radiant that night, in a sleek black dress that hugged her figure perfectly. James couldn't help but admire her from across the room. It was during one of those moments of admiration that James noticed a man watching Emily, a tall, dark-haired man with a sharp jawline and an expensive suit. James caught his eye and smiled politely, but the man didn't reciprocate. Instead, he continued to watch Emily with an intensity that made James uneasy. Later in the evening, Emily introduced him. "James, this is Mark Walters. He's an old friend of Sarah's. Mark, this is my husband, James." Mark extended his hand, his grip firm but cold. "Nice to meet you, James. I've heard a lot about you." James smiled politely. "All good things, I hope." "Of course," Mark replied, though there was something in his tone that James didn't like. The rest of the evening passed without incident, but James couldn't shake the feeling that something was off about Mark. He seemed too interested in Emily, and the way Emily laughed at his jokes, the way her hand rested on his arm just a little too long, made James uneasy. But once again, James pushed the thoughts aside. Emily was his wife. She loved him. She wouldn't betray him like that. Over the next few weeks, James noticed more changes in Emily. She was more secretive, more withdrawn, and whenever he asked her about her day, her answers were vague. One night, James decided to surprise her with a romantic dinner at home. He cooked her favorite meal, lasagna, and set the table with candles and their best silverware. He waited for her to come home, eager to rekindle the romance that seemed to be slipping away. But Emily didn't come home, not until nearly midnight, and when she did, she was distant, distracted. "Where were you?" James asked, trying to keep his voice calm. "Work ran late," she replied curtly, barely glancing at the candle-lit table. James looked at her, his heart sinking. "I made dinner. I thought we could spend some time together." Emily glanced at the table, then back at James. "I'm not hungry. I'm exhausted, James. I'm going to bed." As she walked past him and up the stairs, James felt a pang of helplessness. The woman he loved was slipping away from him, and he didn't know how to stop it. James couldn't ignore the signs anymore. He didn't want to believe that Emily was cheating, but the evidence was mounting. She was gone more often, her affection had cooled, and every time Mark Walters' name came up, she seemed to light up in a way she didn't with him anymore. One evening, while Emily was out working late, James decided to check her phone. She'd left it on the counter while she was in the shower. His hands trembled as he picked it up, his heart pounding in his chest. He unlocked the phone, feeling a pang of guilt, but his suspicions were confirmed almost immediately. There were messages from Mark, flirty, suggestive messages that made James feel sick to his stomach. Mark: "I can't wait to see you tonight. That dress you wore last time, wear it again. It drives me wild." Emily: "I was thinking of something a little more daring tonight." James stared at the screen, his hands shaking, bile rising in his throat. His worst fears had come true. Emily was cheating on him. And worse, she didn't even seem to care about hiding it anymore. He placed the phone back on the counter, his mind racing. What was he supposed to do now? Confront her? Demand an explanation? But as he stood there, another thought entered his mind. What if he could catch her in the act? The night that everything changed was a cool autumn evening, much like any other. James had come home earlier than usual, feeling uneasy after discovering those messages. He didn't want to confront Emily just yet. He wanted to see for himself, to confirm what he already knew deep down. As he approached their house, he noticed that the bedroom light was on, a soft golden glow spilling through the blinds. James parked the car and sat there for a moment, his heart pounding in his chest. Something felt off. He stepped out of the car and walked toward the house, keeping to the shadows. When he reached the side of the house, he looked up at the bedroom window, and that's when he saw it. Through the small gap in the curtains, James saw Emily standing in front of the mirror, wearing a lingerie set he'd never seen before. She was laughing, her head thrown back in a way that made James's stomach twist with jealousy and pain. And then he saw Mark. He was sitting on the edge of the bed, watching her with a smug smile on his face. Emily turned to him, her hands moving seductively over her body as she performed a striptease, something she hadn't done for James in years. James felt a lump rise in his throat. His hands clenched into fists. His entire world shattered in that moment. The woman he had loved, the woman he had trusted with his heart, was giving herself to another man right in their own bedroom. He couldn't move, couldn't breathe. All he could do was watch as Emily removed her lingerie piece by piece until she stood naked in front of Mark, who reached out to touch her. That was enough. James turned away, his heart racing, his mind a whirlwind of emotions. Anger, betrayal, sadness, disbelief. It all hit him at once, a wave of pain that left him breathless. James didn't confront them that night. He couldn't. Instead, he drove to a hotel and checked in, his mind numb with shock. He couldn't believe what he had seen. The woman he had loved for so long, the woman he had built a life with, had betrayed him in the most intimate way possible. The next morning, he went home, packed a bag, and left a note for Emily. "I know everything. Don't bother coming after me." And just like that, James walked away from the life he had built with Emily. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing for sure. He could never go back to the way things were. Thank you for reading this heart-wrenching tale of betrayal, heartbreak, and the courage to walk away from a toxic relationship.